Hey everyone, I am Ben Eubanks and welcome to HR Tech Talks. I hope you're well. I hope you're having a good day so far, wherever you are, and whether you're here with us live as we're going through the conversation with Nathan shortly, or if you're here catching us on the replay later on today or next month or next year, whatever it might be, it's good to have you with us. I'm really excited to have you share this conversation and hear what we're going to talk about. I'm excited about it for sure. And again, we've been warming up, getting ready in the last few minutes for this to go live. So I know that my guest is ready as well. Did you realize that over 99% of the employers in the United States have fewer than 1,000 employees? I'll say that again for those of you in the back. The majority of employers, the vast majority, almost all of them, are very, very small, or relatively small. And one of the things that's easy to forget when we hear all the company names and the headlines, things like that, is that those companies represent this very, very narrow segment of what's happening in the real world. And so today we're going to talk about what's happening in that 99+% of companies that are in that kind of small, mid-sized space. And if you don't know my background, that's something I'm very proud of. I actually started out my career, I got my degree in HR. I worked for companies in that small to mid-sized space from 20 to 700 employees. And I love serving that audience because that's where I came from. And so I can really picture those people and their challenges. And that might be you. Hopefully that's you, because you're going to get something out of the conversation today. So in the discussion, we're going to talk about some of the things that are happening, what's ahead for employers, how to think about what's next, and bring some really interesting views to the table. I'm going to talk with Nathan Christensen of ThinkHR and Mammoth, and talk about what they're doing, how they're serving clients, things like that. So without further ado, Nathan, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, Ben. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you're here. So why don't you, and the audience too, by the way, chime in. Nathan's supposed to chime in, tell us where he's from and what he does. But audience, as you're listening to this, make sure you chime in, let us know where you're from so that we can say hello in the conversation. And again, if you've got a question as we're going along, please pop that in. We'd love to answer that for you live as we're going through. So Nathan, enough of that housekeeping out of the way. Tell us who you are and what you do, sir.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. So as Ben said, my name is Nathan Christensen. I'm CEO of ThinkHR and Mammoth. I'm based here in Portland, Oregon. We're actually having a sunny day today, which we count as win in Portland. And our company provides HR and compliance solutions for a little over 500,000 small and mid-sized businesses across the country. And that's both software and technology-enabled services. And as I mentioned, my role as CEO, I'm an accidental CEO. This isn't a path that I charted carefully throughout my career, but I'm very glad to be here, and we got a great team doing great work for great clients.
So that's a big net that you cast there, helping with compliance for organizations of that size, because I can picture 10 different things in my head about what that could entail, what that could mean. So talk a little more about specifics, if you don't mind. Like, tell me what those things look like. What are some of those services or some examples of how clients have come to you maybe in the last year to get some support? Because I think the people listening to this I want to make sure that we paint that picture really clearly for them about what sorts of things you do.
Yeah, you bet. So Ben, we think about this in sort of two facets. The first is compliance, making sure that an employer is fulfilling their legal obligations to their organization and to their employees. And so we assist clients with the compliance. The second are best practices, helping employers understand what are the best practices that other companies like them are implementing. And this is across the full employee life cycle. So everything from recruiting to hiring to onboarding to performance management, all the way through the cycle. And we do that, as I mentioned, through both software and tech-enabled services. So on the software side, our clients engage with content that we put out on our website, as well as tools like a handbook builder to make sure that a handbook is always kept up to date and current and in compliance. Also learning management software, also training for the HR manager or HR professional in the organization. And then on the tech-enabled services side, we have a team of subject matter experts that's distributed across the country. They're our employees. They are, I think, the best HR experts out there. And they specialize not only in knowing the law, but also in being teachers and coaches and understanding what it means to, as you said, Ben, practice HR for a small and mid-sized business. And so they're available on demand, and our clients can call, chat in, or submit questions to them and get one-to-one counseling on any issues that come up.
Wow. That is awesome. That's the piece that I was probably most excited about when I got to see the product about a year ago, is having that phone a friend, for lack of a better word, right? But not just a friend, but a really, really smart friend, the one that you're always like, I need your advice on this because you know what you're doing. I think that's a tremendous piece that you sometimes miss with the self-serve, DIY kind of approach. And I know that audience. I'm kind of preaching that a little bit because I've been there, and you're like, oh, I can search that, I can find it. Like, we want to take all that on ourselves, and you miss that chance to really tap into someone that could cut 10 hours of research out of your day so you can actually get the stuff done you need to get done. You mentioned one of the things I want to give you kudos on. You said not just compliance, taking care of the thou shalt nots or bad things happen, but also the best practices piece. The very first time I ever sat through a supervisor training, I was brand new in HR, and like, hey, you join the supervisors, they're gonna do this training. I'm like, great, I'm so excited about this. And so we sat there for 4 days, for 3 hours a day, watching videos, right, popping them in and out of the VCR about what not to do. It was all the negative things that could happen. And that was it. And that was the entire training. And I said, when are we going to get to the part where what they should be doing? And we just set this minimum threshold, and we never actually stopped to talk about, here's the best practices. Here's the things that lead to great organizations. Or here's the things that you need to do to be a great leader or a great people manager. We skipped all of that stuff. We just focused on the don't do this or bad things happen. And I feel like we're missing a big gap there. So kudos to you and the team for making sure that's part of it. I think that's something that we really need, not just the avoiding the negatives, but also like trending towards, let's give us something to aspire to as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Ben. And that shows up in all aspects of our work with our clients. Certainly on the advising, if a client comes in with a compliance issue, often through the course of that conversation, the client and our advisor discover different areas where they can evolve their organization, their HR function, and really, create a better employee experience, separate and apart from the initial compliance issue that might have driven the conversation. But also something as basic as a handbook. A lot of employers think of a handbook as a rule book. It's something that sits on the shelf, it collects dust, it tells you all the bad things that could happen and what should happen when they do. We really encourage our clients to think about it as a playbook, and that's the tool that we build for them. But how proactively are they trying to build their organization, their mission, their values, their culture, their policies, all that, thinking of in best practice terms rather than, just defensive terms.
I love that idea of looking at it as a playbook. This is a guide for how to be great, right? Or a guide for how to do great things in our organization, and really focusing on those things, not just yes, we have to have policies. It's a part of this. It's a part we have to put up with, but it doesn't have to be the end point. That could be the beginning, and then we go deeper there. Love that. So I'd love to hear from you. Again, you said, I think 500,000 plus small organizations and mid-sized organizations you're working with. So just a few voices there probably in your ear that you're hearing from. Talk about what the state of the union looks like for these organizations today.
Yeah, for our small mid-sized business clients, it's been a challenging past year. And, we can get into that a little bit more in a minute. But we track something that we call the HR threshold, or the HR curve, and it's the amount of effort and expertise that a business needs to invest to stay, above the compliance threshold and consistent with best practices. And that curve has been increasing at a faster and faster rate over time. More laws being passed for employers. They're more complicated. There are more regulators. It used to be that employers really only had to pay attention to the federal and state rules. Now counties, municipalities are becoming very active in regulating the employer relationship. And so it's getting harder and harder to practice HR. The big businesses, the enterprise businesses, are able to keep up with this. They have the internal expertise to do that. And so they live in what we call the zone of organizational health, the zone above this, this threshold. The small mid-sized businesses, though, they don't necessarily have the resources to do it. And that's a real challenge. And many of them live within what we call the zone of organizational risk, where they may not be understanding their compliance obligations or able to comply with best practices, not for lack of desire, but just they don't necessarily have the internal resources or expertise to do it. And it creates a lot of stress for these organizations. It puts a lot of stress on them. And that's where a lot of these SMBs are right now. It's compounded by the fact that the cost of HR expertise is going up. So, think about the small mid-sized business out there. They need more and more of something, HR expertise, that they can afford less and less of. And that's really challenging. So we're trying to break through that compromise, kind of pioneer HR for the sharing economy, take this HR expertise and allow SMBs to engage with it together. And, but it's not all bad. On the flip side, I'd say for SMBs today, there's also a huge opportunity. the world of business is becoming more people-centric, and I think the last year really accelerated that. And that means, to me, that means business is putting their people front and center and thinking about the people as the primary, strength of the organization. And that's a huge opportunity for SMBs, because SMBs can be very adaptive because they're smaller, they can be nimble. And also, they have a lot of intimacy with their employees. I'm sure, Ben, when you were in that HR role, you knew all your employees, or virtually all of them. You probably knew their families, and that's an SMB environment. And when you have that intimacy with your employees, and you're trying to create a workplace that's very people-centric, those two things create great opportunities to build really good cultures and workplaces.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that kind of a point of pride was, I don't just know you, but I know your spouse. And if I'm having a good day, I know your kids too. That was harder, but I could know the people and could understand what's going on in their lives to some degree. And that's, again, most HR leaders that are working in a smaller shop, that's something that they have to hold on to, because they don't have all these other things. So they can put some more pressure on themselves a little bit to learn those things and understand what those are and recall that. That is a way to make an impact on somebody without spending a single dollar. Just put a little more effort in on our part, and you can connect with them on a deeper level, that you actually remember them, that you know who they are and what they care about and the things that make them excited and the reasons they came to work there, and all those kind of things are wrapped into that. I think there's so much in that piece. Goodness, you just said something a minute ago, so I was going to come back to, and I got all excited about that piece and lost it.
Sorry about that.
You were talking about communication, right? Connecting with your people, building that level of trust. And I think that's a critical part for HR leaders. One of the challenges, I got it. I just recalled it. All right. So I highly doubt anyone that's listening to this said, you know what? I really want to get in HR because I want to help a company be compliant with all federal, state, and local regulations. That's the reason I want to get into this. There's lots of other reasons you could get in. You could accidentally fall into it. You could be the accidental CEO, but fall into HR, right? You could all these different paths that lead to the field that you and I love. And yet, at the end of the day, no one signs up for it for those things. That's just something we have to do as part of our full responsibilities. And that's one thing I kind of hinted at it earlier. I feel like, and tell me if this is true, if I have that phone a smart friend, right? I have these resources here at my disposal. I have this way to build a handbook or do all those other things around compliance. If I can do that in half the time, a third of the time, or even less, a fraction of that time, that gives me more time to focus on those things that do excite me, like recruiting or development or other things. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. What we try to do is we try to cut out, as you described it, Ben, all the research, the analysis, and even monitoring the regulatory environment. We're predictive. We're advising our clients when a law is changing, when they'll need to comply with it. Based on date, based on headcount, all of that. And so we want our clients to be able to focus on how they're going to implement these things, and then, as you said, how they're going to build a great culture around it. And we think of compliance, not dissimilar to like the financial health of a business. If a business is not financially sound or financially healthy, it will create a lot of anxiety in the organization and uncertainty in the organization. Same thing with HR compliance. You've got to have it because it's the foundation on which you want to build. You want to have that rock solid foundation, and then you can build a great culture on top of it. But if the foundation is weak, it's hard to build a great culture when everybody's also seeing that the basic blocking and tackling isn't happening. So yeah, you're exactly right.
Okay. I assumed that was correct. I wanted to go with my gut on that, but I also wanted to pull someone that had you're seeing that day to day, right? Happening with clients across I guess, are you serving clients primarily in the US? I want to make sure that's a piece too.
Yeah, we're basically entirely U.S. We focus on U.S. regulations. We do have some clients that are abroad that have offices or employees in the U.S. that they're looking for guidance on how to manage them. But yeah, we're U.S. based.
Perfect. I want to make sure I had that right too. Okay. So one of the things that I'm kind of curious about, I'm having conversations every day with different leaders, with the kids in school, like all these different things wrapped around healthy returns to normalcy, whatever that is, right? The way things were to some degree. And I'd love to hear from you. How are you and the team thinking about this healthy office reopening or this return to the workplace sort of thing? Because I know there's a lot of different things wrapped into that. And I'm kind of curious what's top of mind for you and the team.
Yeah. Three big things. The first is making sure that the workplace, that you're reopening or reintroducing employees to is going to be healthy and safe for employees. That's, priority number one. The second is, building trust with the team around it, building enthusiasm with the team around it. A lot of employees are interested in coming back to work. They're excited to do it. They just want to make sure it's safe, and they want some more flexibility than they had in the past. And the third thing is being very intentional about this. For the businesses that closed their workplaces and over the last year, we're encouraging them to be very deliberate about reopening it. The last year has been really tough, and I don't want to minimize that because there's been a lot of challenges and a lot of tragedy in the last year. But I would encourage business owners to think, if somebody come to their business last March, April, and said, you're going to send all your employees home for a year. And in that time, I want you to think about what was working in your workplace and what wasn't working in your workplace and how you might be able to do things differently. And in a year, we're going to come back and we're going to reopen the workplace. And we're going to take everything we learned and we're going to kind of reinvent it. That's the sort of intentionality that I think, employers should bring to this, and, should see reopening their workplaces as not going back to normal, but going back to better. How can we have a better workplace than we did before?
I'm thinking back to the early days last year, and you and I were actually chatting before we started because one of the team members at ThinkHR had come in for a webinar I was hosting, and we had 500 people there, and everybody's trying to figure out how do we safely get people remote. And it feels like now we need to put that same care and attention, and use the word deliberate. I think it's a great one to think about how to bring them back. This isn't just a light switch that you can flip on or flip off and suddenly it's back, because these are people. And the research, there's some interesting research last year that shows that in the first 3 months, because we know it takes about 90 days to build a habit, the first 3 months, people are like, oh, this is hard, this is awkward, this is weird, this feels strange. After that 3-month period, those people that had to go remote, you're like, oh, I'm starting to get into this. So it's a little bit of a groove of getting a handle on it. Doesn't mean there weren't issues and problems. And again, you kind of alluded to some of those things, but they kind of got a handle on things. And now we're saying, okay, that skill, that muscle you built over the last year, we're going to completely strip that away and pull you back in the office. And again, it feels like whether it's a staged approach or some other way of gently getting people back into this, we need to think about it with that same amount of care and attention, or we're going to miss the mark. Right? You're going to drive people away. You're going to miss some of the things you talked about earlier about really connecting with them and making them feel like they're a part of something that they care about. I don't know. Any thoughts on that piece a little bit?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Ben. And I think that there are a lot of employers who are assuming that reopening the workplace will be simple and straightforward because it's going back to something that was familiar in the past. But it's not going to be, for the reasons you mentioned. The employees are very different places. Workplaces are very different places in terms of their comfort level in coming back to the workplace. There are different regulations now that employers need to be paying attention to. And so, yeah, I agree. We need to be just as measured as we were when we were transitioning out. And I think, Ben, a lot of the focus right now is on, the larger companies, particularly in Silicon Valley. They're going fully remote. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of dialogue around, how will that work and how do you make that work? And I think that's really important. But, what we see is most small, mid-sized businesses have to maintain a physical presence. They're the florist down the street, they're the doctor's office. And, we're trying to make sure there's an active dialogue too around reopening an office when that your employees are going to be in person. And exercising some new hybrid muscles if that some of your team is going to be remote or remote more often than they were in the past.
One of the things I'm thinking about, you talked about the differences in these really large organizations, and again, they have more infrastructure, more tools, more people in general, and so if there's a little bit of slack in that, and there's people, again, I don't know this, let's say people are just 10% less productive because they're trying to do all these things remotely and they're missing some things, that's going to matter more at a small organization when there's 10 of you or 50 of you than if there are 5,000 of you, right? You can kind of manage that fluctuation a little bit with a lot more people around. But when you're smaller, I always use the example, when you're one person, you hire somebody, you just doubled in size, right? When you hire another person, you're 50% bigger than you were yesterday. And so it's each individual impact there has a bigger impact overall on the business and operations and how you serve customers if you're a smaller organization. And so I wanted to make sure we talked on that one. So
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to ask a question. How do you see
Sure.
how do you see your team really supporting this? Right. So we talked about some of the things there. I assume the team's going to become on full alert, ready to take a lot of questions and support that. Probably already have been as people are thinking about this. But what do you think is really the role of ThinkHR Mammoth as this transition period kind of begins and as employers start to come back? How do you see yourself serving them?
Yeah, and you're right, Ben. The activity level has picked up a lot in the last couple of weeks. I would say January and February were a little bit quiet on this front, but just over the last 2 to 3 weeks, we've been hearing from a lot of employers who are now reopening or making imminent plans to reopen and are looking for support in that. And we will do what we always do, only with the new issue here, but make sure that we are monitoring the environment for our clients, the external environment, the legal environment, the regulatory environment, best practices, so we can be letting them know what's going on outside their business, and then working with them through our content and also through our advising to make sure they know their compliance obligations and also that they understand the best practices. One of the unique things, because we work with so many small mid-sized businesses across the country, is we learn organically with our clients. When we're interacting with a client in upstate New York and they're coming up with a very creative way to handle this, that idea gets absorbed into our team. And there's this powerful network effect of then when there's an employer in Boulder, Colorado, and they're facing a similar issue, our team can leverage not only their own ideas, but the techniques that clients around the country are using, to help everybody raise their game.
I love that. That's a really great idea to pull those things in. And I guess that makes sense logically, but I never stopped to think about it becomes also a hub for this is what's working. Don't do that. Stay out of that. They tried that and it was a miserable failure, or it didn't work out right. Like we can build these two different set of practices for the things to do and the things to probably avoid. I also didn't think about that though, but kind of the inbound conversations you're having from different HR and small business leaders that wear the HR hat, right? A lot of small business owners that have to do the hiring and everything else, but don't actually have an HR title. All of those leaders that are calling, that also becomes a leading indicator for what's about to happen in the bigger economy. Right?
Absolutely.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and we saw that, back in March and April in a really intense way because, if we remember that time period, the effects of COVID-19 didn't hit the country all at once. There was kind of this, it wasn't gradual, it was pretty quick, but there was this process by which, across the country, businesses, and, it started with the urban areas that had the highest concentration and the highest risk of transmission. They started to shut down, then it went more suburban than rural. And so we could see what was happening in clients and then make sure that the next phase of clients was going to be ready for it. And, one of the things that I think some employers are forgetting is over the last year, although many of them have had to put their businesses on hold or substantially on hold, they've been making a lot of investment in their people and in their culture. And I think about this pizza parlor. I know you're in Alabama, Ben. This pizza parlor was in Georgia. And when COVID hit, they had to shut down initially, and then they reopened with a limited capacity. And they understood that this affected their employees a lot because their livelihood was now in jeopardy. And what they did is they put together care packages for every employee every week of what they could get their hands on: pizza sauce, dough, pasta, vegetables, also toilet paper, things that they could procure from their vendors, and they would send those out to all their employees on a weekly basis to make sure that the employees were taken care of. Now, that was a huge investment in their people and their culture. And, when they reopen, and I think they've now reopened, that's going to come back to them. Their people are going to be, so committed to that organization and to each other and to the customers. And, the reopening allows us to sort of bring that to fruition.
I've loved collecting those kinds of stories over the last year about how companies have done that, because so much, again, we can beat on the headlines a little bit, right? It's all virtual happy hours and things like that. And right, those probably serve a place, but really things like that, where you get to show someone that you care, just like we talked about earlier, right? If I'm an HR leader and I could just know your name and know the name of your significant other or your kids, that has value for someone because you care enough to try to do that at least. And to hear examples like that where they're trying to do something, trying to serve their people, trying to do something that no one asked them to, no one's going to make them do that. If they didn't do that, the employees might not have known that was even an option, but because they took that burden on themselves, they're going to reap the benefits of loyalty and trust and connection, where their companies that didn't do those kinds of things are going to fall behind a little bit. One of the questions I want to ask you is, you are, accidental or not, you are a CEO and you run a mid-sized organization yourself. And I'd love to hear from you. How are you, has your, I'm trying to figure out how to ask the question the right way. Has your approach changed in the last year? Have you thought about, I've got to be more intentional about this, or before I just took this for granted and now I can't do that anymore? I'm kind of curious how your leadership style of the organization might have changed in the last year and what that's meant for you.
Yeah, for me, Ben, the main thing has been to focus on listening and learning. And that's related to the pandemic. That's also related to the movement for racial justice. I feel like this has been a year for CEOs to really learn from their employees, learn from their customers, because their environment's changing really quickly, and we need to stay current with that. In the course of the pandemic, I also realized that a key role that I need to play is connecting employees at a couple of different levels during a period of crisis. That means connecting our people with each other, that building community where people can get support from each other, can get ideas from each other, connecting people with our mission more than ever. We've always been a mission-oriented company, but in a time of crisis, everyone wants to make sure that they have a strong sense of purpose for what they're doing every day, because there's a sense of wanting to help. Connecting people with facts and information, so operating very transparently and empowering our team to be part of the solution as we work our way through a crisis, and connecting people with the community. We don't want employees to be thinking that they have to make a decision in a time of crisis between helping their community and helping their company. We want to see that working together and working within the business can be a vehicle for positive change and support for their community. So for me, it's really been about seeing myself as connecting employees in those different ways as we all get through this crisis.
One of my favorite classes in school was economics. Again, for the data nerd, probably doesn't surprise you, but one of the things that sticks out to me is there was some famous economist at one time that said the thing that a business does is not just create jobs, but it's impacting the community through, right, we're selling things that people need. We are providing employment for these people so they can take care of their families and buy stuff from other vendors around, right? And it's creates this little economy. And that's one of the things, as you're saying that, so that popped in my head is, as your team is serving these different leaders for pizza restaurants and for construction companies and for banks and 100 other kinds of things out there, all the different kinds of employers you can think of that have, you go to their office and you go and visit them, and there are 10 of them in there. As they're serving those people, they are also enabling their communities to be a better place. And I'm just excited to think about all the impact that your team has had in the last year and will continue to in the coming years. That's a fun thing for me to think about. So yeah. If someone wants to connect with ThinkHR Mammoth and learn more about what you and the team are up to, I know you've got some big announcements and things coming up in the next month or two. So what's the best way for someone to connect?
Yeah, we're dedicated to our clients, but we're out there to help small, mid-sized business health in America. So, we're there for any small, mid-sized business that needs support. And the best way is on our website. Follow me, follow our company on LinkedIn, Twitter, and we put out a lot of thought leadership and hope we can help in any way we can.
Awesome. Wonderful. Nathan, this has been so much fun. I appreciate you for hanging out with me, for putting up with me as I'm falling over myself to talk about this stuff because I love it so much. I appreciate you for hanging out with us on HR Tech Talks today.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Goodness. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you are an HR leader or a business leader or someone who cares about talent at a small or mid-sized organization, definitely give them a look. They're doing great work, and I'm so thankful to have connected with them and to know more about what they're up to. Thank you to Mitch, Donnie, Clyde, Salim. Thank you to all of you and the rest of you who are watching this, again, live on the replay. I appreciate each and every one of you. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Enjoy yourself. And we will be back here next week, as always, with another conversation on HR Tech Talks with an innovative company serving the HR talent learning leaders out there. So excited and look forward to seeing you then.